Good evening, everyone. Look at that, a room of chattering book lovers. It's lovely to have you all here, thank you. Good evening, my name is Jacqueline Booton. I am the Executive Director of Stella. Thank you very much. It's a joy of a job, it really is kind of a dream. Thank you all for joining us for the announcement of the 2023 Stella Prize Longlist. I want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we're on. That's the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nations. I pay my respects to elders past and present, and I want to acknowledge the First Nations people in the room with us. This is sovereign land that we meet on, and at a time in Australia where a conversation about voice and sovereignty and the future is so critical, I feel very honoured to be working with so many First Nations artists and activists and authors in the work that we do at Stella. It's a night of celebration. Every year we get to start the prize cycle with this announcement of 12 books, and in a moment one of our judges will hop up on stage and start to announce those. Before they do, I'd like to make some thank yous. Stella is a collective effort. Everything we do is done in partnership with a range of people. And so to start, I want to thank some of our Stella founders. I know a couple of them are in the room tonight. Some of those original women who looked at the Australian literary industry and saw that there was a problem and decided to change it. What you created was one of the most meaningful literary prizes in the country, and it's a real honour to get to continue your work. I also want to acknowledge Ellen Koshland, who is a founding patron of Stella. Ellen really was integral to getting Stella off the ground right at the beginning, and she remains one of our most vocal and celebratory supporters, and if not already here, is on her way. I also want to acknowledge Paula McLean of the McLean Foundation. As many of you know, last year we ran an endowment campaign to secure prize money for the Stella Prize long into the future. Paula made a cornerstone gift of $1 million and made a matching call to the community to join her in achieving our goal. And it really galvanised a nationwide movement to ensure that the Stella can continue forever. Endowments are a project about the future. They are about legacy and longevity. And Paula's commitment and that all of the extraordinary people who joined her in making donations really have, set a future in which the Stella will continue to support authors and readers for generations to come. We are extraordinarily grateful to Paula for that work. Thank you. In a minute you will know who the 12 longlisted authors are, and this is the bit where I try and keep a poker face. One of the things I want to acknowledge is that when in 8 weeks' time we will announce one of those authors as the winner of the 2023 Stella Prize. That author will receive $60,000 in prize money. That award money is made possible by the support of the Wilson Foundation, and in particular the extraordinary generosity of philanthropist and passionate reader Karen Wilson. It is our 4th year of working with the Wilson Foundation in this way. They have been a supporter of Stella for many years before that, and we are extraordinarily honoured that they are the Stella Prize Award partner again this year. I also would really like to acknowledge the Copyright Agency. Stella has benefited from the extraordinary vision of the Copyright Agency in terms of supporting our sector widely. So tonight's longlistees will all take home $1,000 in prize money. That money comes directly from the Copyright Agency. They also make possible new projects at Stella, support for our judges in terms of stipends, and the kind of new projects that we want to deliver for women and non-binary writers. The Copyright Agency does so much in our sector, and I am just delighted to know that they are here with us tonight, and we are so grateful for your help. It feels like long credits, but it is genuinely because this is how Stella is able to function. We are a very small organisation and we do everything in partnership. The Wheeler Centre, an extraordinary partner, we are so grateful to them for hosting us tonight for this partnered Longlist announcement. We work with Carol Schwartz and the Trawala Foundation on many of our projects. We have with us in the room tonight Catherine Andrews, who has been an ambassador for Stella from the very beginning. There is a new team of Stella advocates at Mecca Empower who are helping us plan new things for the future. We're very grateful for their support. I also want to acknowledge Neighbourhood Books, who are here for all of your book buying needs this evening. The Stella board is a tireless group of people who really put their shoulder to the wheel in terms of making what we do possible. All of that happens under the steady leadership of Karen Murray. Karen, thank you for everything that you do. And on a personal note, I want to thank the team. I am incredibly lucky to work with people who are dedicated to making the experience that Stella Prize authors feel the best possible. Everything we do, we are thinking about how will the authors experience this, how do we make it better for them. And then behind the kind of scenes, I work with people who care about books, who talk about books non-stop, and it's a real joy and pleasure to do so. Finally, to people in the front row, to the 2023 Stella Prize judging panel, Alice Pung, Beejay Silcox, Alison Whittaker, Jeff Sparrow, and there you are, Astrid Edwards. I couldn't see you to make eye contact. I have seen a little of the extraordinary work that you have done, and it is a joy to watch the care and rigour that you have brought to this process. I genuinely want to say, you guys are awesome, by which I mean I am in awe of the work that you've done. Thank you. And on that note, I want to ask one of you to join us. So for everyone, please welcome to the stage Alice Pung. Alice is chair of the 2023 Stella Prize judging panel. She is herself an award-winning author and bestseller and was recognised in 2022 for her incredible support for literature with the Order of Australia Medal. Alice, please join me, and everyone please join me in welcoming her.
Hello everyone, it's a great pleasure to be here today, and I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, as well as all the Aboriginal elders, past, present and emerging, on the lands in which this broadcast reaches. I'd like to thank the Stella Prize for making it possible for us, all the judges, all 5 of us, to have read such a wonderful, diverse and electrifying mixture of books this year. It's my absolute pleasure to announce this Stella Prize. But before I do, I'd like to acknowledge 6 very special people in the room today. Some I haven't met, but by their first names, and you'll know who you are. Twee, Grace, Adrienne, Louisa, Edwina and Mandy. Thank you for being here in person with us today. So now it's my absolute pleasure to announce the 12 outstanding books longlisted for the 2023 Stella Prize. Please hold your applause till the end. These are not in preferential order, so... The first book is The Furies by Mandy Beaumont, published by Hachette, and please hold your applause till the end. The second book is Every Version of You by Grace Chan, published by Affirm Press. The third book is We Come With This Place by Deborah Dank, published by Echo Publishing. The fourth book is Big Beautiful Female Theory by Eloise Grills, published by Affirm Press. The fifth book is The Jaguar by Sarah Holland Batt, published by University of Queensland Press. The sixth book is Hydra by Adrienne Howell, published by Transit Lounge. The seventh book is Jack of Hearts, QX11594, by Jackie Huggins and Nairi Jarrow, published by Magda Bala Books. The 8th book is All That's Left Unsaid by Tracy Leanne, published by HarperCollins Publishers. The 9th book is Indelible City, Dispossession and Defiance in Hong Kong by Louisa Lim, published by Text Publishing. The 10th book is Iris by Fiona Kelly McGregor, published by Pan Macmillan. The 11th book is Decadence by Tui On, published by University of Western Australia Publishing. And finally, but not least, the 12th book is Bad Art Mother by Edwina Preston, published by Wakefield Press. So please join me in congratulating all the longlistees. Now, I'm just going to make 2 comments before I call upon all my fellow judges on stage to join me in discussing these 12 excellent books. So the first comment is that it was an absolute joy to judge with my fellow judges Alison, Beejay, Astrid and Jeff, the diversity and experience that each of these judges brought as in their experts in their respective fields made this a really robust and deeply interrogative, artistically rigorous process. So for all you longlistee authors, this was a decision which we took with great seriousness and which we, spent many, many hours deliberating upon. And we can assure the winners that you're not dealing with amateur judges here, you're dealing with the best, and it was an absolute joy to work with them. And the second comment I'd like to make is you notice out of the 12 books, there are 10 that come from independent presses, and many of them are from very, very small publishers. We never took the publishers into consideration. We took the text itself. And the fact that these publishers, the smaller independent publishers, are the ones willing to take risks on the writing that is most exciting, the most eclectic, and the most far out weirdest, this country has ever seen, says a lot to commend these smaller independent publishers. And now, without any further ado, I'd like to welcome Alison, Beejay, Astrid and Jeff onto the stage. Thank you. All right, everyone. To kick off our discussion, we're going to start with discussing the non-fiction texts that we thought were the most compelling and exciting this year. And so Beejay is going to start off by talking about Indelible City.
It's so wonderful to be here, and I fucking love this long list. I love it so much, and it's such a delight to be talking about this book in particular. I defy you to read the prologue to this extraordinary piece of, memoir and journalism and not be compelled to read the rest of this book. In her prologue, Louisa Lim hands us 2 questions. The first is an ethical question. How can you defend, how can you ethically justify being objective when the fundamental tenets of democracy are sliding from beneath your feet? What does it mean to be a journalist in a time when truth is contested and contestable? The second question she hands us is existential, which is how do you tell the story of the place that made you? How do you give voice to an inherently polyphonic place? And both of those questions couldn't be more timely, more pointed for Australian readers, not just regionally, but looking at home, because what Louisa gives us is a collision of empire and legacy, a tangle of colonialism and sovereignty, a call to arms that asks us not just to be a witness to the moment, but to step into it. It is a really extraordinary piece of work that manages to sort of collide both a journalist's incisiveness and a daughter's love, a daughter's care for the city that made her. And it's an extraordinary, tender, beautiful and gripping piece of work that we were just absolutely caught by. So I'm delighted to commend to you Indelible City.
Thanks so much, Beejay.
We should make a step.
Yes. And the next book that we're going to discuss also tackles the personal and the political in a very brave and gritty and very almost self-effacing way, doesn't it? And Alison will talk about this book.
Yeah. Before I do, I want to acknowledge that I'm here tonight on Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung country. I want to acknowledge their elders and ancestors and their continuing sovereignty over this place, as well as the ongoing sovereignty of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander nations on the country where this is broadcasting to today. Eloise Grills has given us Big, Beautiful Female Theory. It's an ambitious work that flips the gaze put upon the fat body. Expectations were high after The Fat Bitch in Art, her Melbourne Writers' Prize-winning essay, and we think that those expectations were met. The work is formally explosive, bringing together slapdash watercolours with all their gorgeous viscera, with essays that are variously theoretical, confessional, and very rooted in their moment. Both the essays and their illustrations are works of excellence in their own right, and the enormity of the labour bringing them together really impressed us. It's a technical triumph. Part of the ambition of Big, Beautiful Female Theory is its context. There's a lack of attentiveness on this continent to the politics of the fat body, except through the most patronising and violent drive to the thin. And this is one of the texts that I hope opens up more space here for fat politics to get heard. But its power is not just in its response to this context. In its own right, it's an evocative carnal experience as a reader that had me gritting my teeth. It's observant, attentive, frank, at times outrageous. It's self-aware without being indulgent. It's funny without betraying its tensions. It's embodied without getting stuck there. It's cacophonous, but threaded together, and in the best way, it's a provocation. I can't remember if Eloise is in the room with us today, but if you are listening, wherever you're listening from, congratulations on the long listing and on this truly remarkable work.
Now, the third book is one I'll talk about, which is both tender and brutal. And it's one that really stood out to us in the voice of the narrator. There is deep pain in these pages, but it's an extraordinary memoir because there's anger at injustice, but it's a book that reads with a sense of humanity about it, a sense of great, deep, throbbing love for not only other human beings, but for this country. It's a book deeply rooted in country and in family and in landscape without being, wanky or pretentious or, self-indulgent in any of those ways, without being thematic about racism and classism and disadvantage. Without all these things, it tackles the grand themes in a very quiet and comforting manner. It doesn't offer us immediate comforts, but it's a book with a big payoff, and there is no explosion at the end, but there's moments of quiet joy and moments of just a big, expansive, generous personality that shines through this book. So it's We Come With This Place by Deborah Dank. As David Malouf said, it is wonderfully illuminating. I think about this book months after reading it, and I hear the voices. And it was not a didactic book, but I feel deeply seated lessons from it that I'll never forget. Surely because it's not a didactic book. So this is We Come With This Place by Deborah Dank. Thank you, Alison. Now, the next book is a book with a lot of hearts, because it's called Jack of Hearts, and Alison is going to talk about this one.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure to be talking to you about Jack of Hearts. Of course, I have prepared remarks because I'm not as off the cuff and skilled as the orators beside me. But in Jack of Hearts, Dr. Jackie Huggins and Nairi Jaro have together shared with us the story of their father, Jack Huggins. And it's not just his story that envelops the frame. We are also made privy to some of the story of the formation of their memories, research, and restoring. Jack of Hearts sits alongside biographical writings driven by and about the same renowned family, alongside the biography Auntie Rita, published some time ago now, and the recent new edition of Dr. Huggins' collected writings in Sister Girl. As a historical project, Jack of Hearts provides a crucial view of the complex and vexed circumstances of mob who went to war off this continent in the 20th century. But it is also, as so many projects about our people, by our people are, a project of devotion, responsibility and care for family and for community. A devotion that is clearly visible even in the act of its creation as a text and as a relational history. It is a vital intergenerational project that we hope will continue to have relevance as audiences keep turning back to it to understand a much bigger history, told in a small way through the life and expertise of a family. And if you're watching this, either live or later on, my sincere respect and congratulations for this long listing to Dr. Jackie Huggins and Nairi Jaro, and congratulations on your powerful historical project.
So that concludes our non-fiction list, and I repeat the list again: Indelible City, Big Beautiful Female Theory, We Come With This Place, and Jack of Hearts. And now what I'm going to move on to is our poetry category, and Jeff is going to talk about the book that he has, The Jaguar.
Yes, indeed I am. If you're someone who reads contemporary Australian poetry, you will know the name of Sarah Holland Batt. If you're someone who doesn't read contemporary Australian poetry, well, I suggest you start, and Sarah Holland Batt would be a good place to start with. This is an extraordinary book, and it's bookended by poems that the author wrote about the illness and eventual death of her father. And these poems are incredibly moving. We've actually, all of us saw someone moved to tears about this book just the other day. But I don't want to give the impression that it's bleak or desolate. It also contains poems about getting drunk, about hanging out with your friends, about travelling, about your family. And Sarah Holland Batt has an extraordinary ability with language and a talent for the apt comparison. In the first few pages, she compares her father to a giant koi fish, to a parachutist, to a 16th century monk in a cartouche. And each time she does it, you come away thinking, yes, that's exactly what it is. Many of us, I think, will have experiences of extreme emotions or extreme circumstances and will not be able to find the words to express ourselves. This is a book of those words, and that's what makes it so powerful. If you're not accustomed to reading poetry, it's a very accessible book. It's a book that you can read in a single evening, but the words that are in it will stay with you for a long, long time, and I'm very pleased that it's on this long list.
So our other poetry book is on a different vein. I think I liken it to going to the local corner store as a juvenile delinquent and thinking you'd steal a packet of jelly snakes and finding a big box of Cadbury roses right smack bang in the middle of the centre, and it's Decadence by Twee On.
Oh, well, I don't need to say anything then. I think you've captured it.
No, you do. You have written beautiful notes about this extraordinary book.
Yes, and I'm very, very happy to speak to them. In Decadence, Tui On eviscerates poetry and publishing on this continent until we see its very skeleton. Having done that, she builds it back up again, justifying the poetic project through a demonstration of just what it's capable of, what it's enmeshed in, and what it can be responsible for. And she does it with such clear and careful skill. Line to line, each poem is exquisite. Decadence addresses, without letting its terms be set alone by, whiteness, racism, and patriarchy. It has a defiance to it, far beyond this, that's most compelling. The collection is wry, playful, at times cynical, but it's never gratuitous. It's disarming and surprising, very aware of the expectations of its audience. And in my reading at least, even from page to page, it got my guard down and it knocked me sideways, just when I thought I had it pinned. A nod to her concurrent practice as a critic, she sacrifices neither the critic's nor the poet's gaze. There's not a word or a gesture wasted, a precision that does not sacrifice the collection's emotional resonance, and that emotional resonance ranges wide. Decadence delighted us to read, and it's also delightful to be presenting it on this long list tonight. I understand that you're here in the audience tonight, so I wanted to take the chance to personally congratulate you, Tui On this long listing.
So those are our two books of poetry, The Jaguar and Decadence. And now we're going to move on to fiction. So our first book of fiction, which I'll talk about, is this beautiful book here by Tracy Leanne, who is not here tonight because she lives in the US, but she definitely is an Australian female author. She grew up in the western suburbs of Sydney. And this is a book that breaks your heart and then puts it back together again. It's a book that is an absolute page-turner. You don't hear that much among literary awards. Books that you can pick up and you turn the pages, books that you can give to your grandma who lives in, Corryong, or books that you can give to a local high school student. So it's a murder mystery. It's also a mystery book as well. So the crime that's being committed is that a young man is dead in a Chinese restaurant, and you're trying to find out the circumstances in which he's died. But then as you read, it's a great social commentary about poverty, about expectations, about what it's like if you're a young person and already you're prejudged for a particular destiny in life. It's a book with a lot of heart and a lot of thought. And it's a book that is quite political without being in your face about it, and that treats each character quite empathetically and beautifully humanises every person, from the minor to the major characters in this book. So this is All That's Left Unsaid by Tracy Leanne. Now, the next book that Jeff is going to talk about is about a feral mother. It's wonderful.
Yeah, I'm really pleased to talk about Bad Art Mother by Edwina Preston. As the title suggests, this is a book about the intersection of creativity and traditional expectations of female domesticity. It's an engagement with Australian, in fact, specifically Melbourne literary history. You'll see elements of Gwen Harwood, of the Heidi, Bohemians, and actually one of the pleasures of the book, particularly if you're sort of engaged in the literary culture, is trying to identify who the minor characters might be. As a former editor of Overland, I was quite pleased by the treatment of Meanjin in the book. But at the centre of this novel are the letters by the fictional poet whose story it tells, and they are an extraordinary evocation of a kind of mid-century proto feminism. It's something that we discussed in the judging meeting about how beautifully they captured that kind of sensibility. It's a bit like reading the letters of Sylvia Plath. It's not a conventional historical novel. It actually does something a lot more interesting and innovative than that, in that it mixes these factual elements with a reimagined story that's told from multiple perspectives over a prolonged chronology, so that it really kind of prizes open the issues that it's investigating and kind of reveals that both family and art are the places where the best things in our lives happen, but they're also the places where the worst things in our lives happen. It's a very moving book. It's also very witty, and on a line-by-line level, it's beautifully written. It's a book that I've been pressing upon my family and friends, and it's a real treat to be able to recommend it to people here tonight as well.
And Jeff, Edwina is here tonight. It's just such a personally moving book for me, Edwina. So congratulations. We've all felt like bad art mothers in our lives for the women in this audience. It's an extraordinary book. And the next one is equally as special because it's something we've never seen before, a version of Australia that is seen through a new and complete lens. And Astrid will talk about this. It's Every Version of You by Grace Chan.
It is a delight to talk about Every Version of You. Grace, I believe you're here. Congratulations. The genre and speculative fiction does not always appear on long listings or short listings, or indeed win literary prizes in Australia. And I do question that, and it is a beautiful thing to be able to introduce Every Version of You. If you haven't read it yet, it is set in Melbourne in the 2080s. It is an imagining of what may come for those of us in the room tonight and those of us who are watching. The streets that we walked to get here are different in the 2080s, and Every Version of You gives you a way to imagine what those streets might be like for your children and your grandchildren. The story requires us to think about what the technology that is, changing around us every day might mean, not just for the society that we live in, but for ourselves personally. The treatment of illness and pain and discomfort in one's body means something very different if technology gives you the option to upload yourself, and how that might impact how you feel, how those you love feel, and the relationships that you manage to hold in a very bleak future in some ways. It is a climate change world. Economic imperatives are different. Work is different. I don't think it's too far to say that the meaning of life, if the terms around us are changed so much, we're forced to change with it. I challenge you all to read this book and to think about what it means for those you love and what comes next. Grace, congratulations on getting speculative fiction once again on the long list for the Stella Prize.
Now, the next book is one full of furious energy, which Astrid will also talk about.
Mandy, you are also here. Congratulations, and I find it really difficult to explain what you have done. I really mean that. This is a challenging read, and I know you hear judges sometimes say that, but I mean that in its literal sense. It's not always a pleasant read. I have read this book several times now. It gets more beautiful with each reading. And I don't know how you did that. It is masterful and skillful. I have notes for this one. The Furies, of course, recalls the Furies of Greek mythology, and the Furies are present in every page, and it is not the three, personifications of vengeance from Greek mythology. It is the women and the children who are no longer with us. And they are the chorus to the novel. They permeate the novel. They influence the main character, Cynthia. She feels them, she sees them, she hears them, she speaks with them. And it was a deeply painful experience to think about the chorus of your own life and who might be talking to you and see that, evoked on the page. I think the main character, Cynthia, has a little bit of many of us, the unpleasant parts of us, as well as the beautiful parts of us. And, in a book soaked in violence, there is power and a challenge and a call to action and a request for rebellion, which is heartwarming and very, very exciting. Congratulations, Mandy.
Now, the next book, which is one that electrified us all, Beejay is going to talk about.
I'm so excited to talk about this book. I believe you're in the audience, Adrienne.
Yeah.
When you're a critic, you become literate in tropes and patterns. And I work as a critic. In the last 5 years, I've written almost a review a week. And you get to see the kind of patterns of things that happen, the patterns of stories. It is remarkable and deeply, deeply exciting to say that this book wrong-footed me at every single turn. It takes the tropes that live inside contemporary literature, the big bad bush, the untidy young woman, our notion of what is aesthetically pleasing, and it blows them all up. And what is wonderful about it is that the result is feral and fanged in more than one way. This is an extraordinary first effort as a novelist. It is confident and assured and also entirely unhinged. We were having conversations about each of these books, about if you put them into people's hands, what are the conversations they would have with friends? And we sort of said, but how the fuck would you talk about Hydra? And that's magnificent to me. It's exciting to me that there is a book that is so alive with possibility, that is so ambitious, that tries so many different things, and somehow magnificently, impossibly, we have this cohesive mystery work of strangeness. It manages to talk about mid-century modernism and Australian military conspiracies, and you are there with her. It is an incredible work, and I am so delighted to put it on our long list. Congratulations, Adrienne.
And our final book is one that uses the vernacular to spectacular effect. And Astrid is going to talk about this because you understand that voice, don't you, Astrid?
Oh, I don't understand it, but I had a really personal response to Iris by Fiona McGregor. Iris is set in 1930s Depression-era Sydney, and specifically the Rocks, Surrey Hills, the Hungry Mile. We get a bit of Glebe in there. Really specific locations that hundreds of thousands of people pass through every day. It's a well-worn, well-trodden area in Australian literature, shall we say. This is based on research. The main character, Iris Weber, is a very real historical figure that no one knows about, very minor historical figure who was imprisoned and put on trial for the murder of her husband, which is almost beside the point in the story. This is an evocation of what it felt like to be extremely poor. Living, hour by hour on the streets of Sydney, no family. This is a book about chosen families and found families, in an era of extreme poverty. Pre-World War II. This is a celebration of building relationships and queer love and exploration of identity at a time when Sydney was extremely violent and extremely corrupt, and a woman without the protection of marriage or wealth was extremely vulnerable. And I had a really personal response to this because my grandmother, Ivy, would have been of an age with Iris and as poor. And instead of turning to prostitution, my grandmother was basically, put to work as a very young child in the old Colgate Palmolive factory, making soap for everybody else. And I feel like if my grandmother had seen this in print, I think it's very meaningful. Thank you. Yeah.
So that concludes our wonderful long list. So the next part of the evening, because I know you all want to go off and celebrate, but I think it's important, and I promise we won't waffle on about wankery, but this is interesting stuff. We would like to discuss two things. So as a shortlistee in the past myself, I've always been fascinated how the judges come to these decisions. Now, we're not going to give our judging secrets away because obviously that's confidential, but you want to see how the sausage is made in a room full of vegans, how these things are done. And that's not really a joke because, you want to know where your judges are coming from, because some people are not shortlisted, and we had over 200 books. So that's the first thing, is we're going to reveal a glimpse of how we dealt with it as judges, including the spreadsheet, thing that we used. And the second thing is we'd like to talk about the long list as a whole, how proud we are of it, what it means to us each personally, because we have spent over hundreds of hours on this. It's not, we have read over 200 books. Yes. So would you like to start, Beejay? You're nodding. And
yeah, I'm just so proud of the collective story that this list tells about where the heartbeat in Australian literature is. And I think you aptly summed it up in your introduction, and the heartbeat of Australian literature is in little presses. In little presses brave enough to tell big stories, and I'm so deeply excited that we have so many of them here. And like you said, not by design at all, but entirely by accident. I think I'm often asked as a critic what you look for in a book, and at first you're just looking for a heartbeat. You're looking for something that feels alive, that has blood and fangs and teeth and is beating at you. And all the books in this list, when we were thinking of what is the story that they collectively tell, I think that's the story they tell. These books are so alive. They're generous, they're feral, they're provocative, but they're all alive. And that's what's so deeply exciting about it. And I think we all felt it when we would find one of these books on the list, on this massive, incredible spreadsheet. It is a beautiful spreadsheet. If anyone is an Excel devotee, or if it's one of your particular kinks, as it is mine, a beautifully filled out spreadsheet is gorgeous. And we would find it, and then we wrote comments on each other's comments, and you could see some books just got larger and larger and larger comments. Yeah. And it became this textual conversation about the things that we were in love with. And you could almost have picked this long list just from looking at the conversation we had on this spreadsheet, because the minute we caught that whiff of something that was beating and sort of throbbing at us, we would find it and talk about it with each other. And this is the result.
And let me tell you, we had discretion, so you didn't need to look at the spreadsheet every day or every hour. You could let a month pass. But the reason I mention the spreadsheet is that every single book that was considered for the Stella Prize was on that shortlist, whether they were large publishers, small publishers, non-fiction, graphic novels, and every single book had at least 2 or 3 comments. So we deeply considered them all. Sorry, Astrid.
We also had little fights. If we disagreed with someone not liking a book, we went to town on them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Can't go further than that.
Just wanted to say that.
That's all I had.
Yeah, good on you. Good on you for being honest. Yeah, there were some books we all deeply disliked. All 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, we're like, what the hell is this? Why did it get published?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, look,
Not a fucking chance. Yeah.
this evening is a celebration of
Yeah.
good books, but
Yeah.
we also read a lot of terrible books, so it balances out. The other thing I'd like to say is this wasn't really a factor in the discussions that we were having, and we were just trying to assess the books according to the criteria of the Stella Prize, which is very brief. But I think it's actually kind of cool that there's a bunch of books on this list that perhaps haven't received the attention that they should have received, and that if this prize can give them a little bit more attention, I think that's a really, really good outcome and something I'm really happy with, because, you know, there are so many books published each year and the churn is enormous, and sometimes it's really good to sort of step back and take another look at books and say that this deserves more readers.
And I want to challenge all the readers in the room and watching, and, you know, there are many of you. How do you feel when you read a book and you kind of know what's going to happen? Like, what's the point? Even, like, there's a thrill in not knowing what an author is going to make you think.
Or feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are so many books on this list where we were wrong-footed. I love that feeling. I think the worst thing is to be passionately indifferent about something. And yeah, it is that. We were talking about this before, how corrosive that sense of apathy can be when you read for a living, and when you read and you're sort of mining for a different kind of awe, when you're mining to be awestruck, to come across things that you just don't have feelings about, that you don't remember. And all of these books, I am thinking about these books months later. I can quote passages from them that have stuck with me after a first reading. They are just so, they're formulastic. They're committed to the various vernaculars that they use. They're committed to place. Yeah, they're extraordinary.
The Queen Anne furniture. Smelling of menstrual blood. That is extraordinary passage. And, you know, we did read the books with a sense of aesthetic sensibility, but the aesthetic sensibility with other awards is kind of at the top. But for us, it was, you know, it wasn't just the aesthetic sensibility, it was also the sheer ugliness of some of these stories. The brutality, the mischief in them, the unexpected humour. And I can assure you all, long-listed authors, that we never judge your book by its cover, because we were all given e-readers to read these books. Because seriously, you do judge a book by its physical cover, its heft, its publisher, everything. And we didn't have any of that. We all had e-readers, and everything looked the same, except for the graphic novels and the books where image was a big consideration. Because some books had really crappy covers.
They did.
Hate to be the one to say it, but
No, you're right.
That's true. I mean, reflecting on some of the things we've just talked about, it's an enormous honour just sitting here thinking about this process, to be asked to read, be invited to read 200 books from women and non-binary writers. And because of the heft of that responsibility, I think, while some of us had books that we were really persuaded on from the get-go, I think it's healthy to harbour a sense of doubt and openness, and be ready to be surprised, be ready to be thrilled by a particular text. And that's especially the case when you're judging something that, how do you compare something like fiction with poetry, with a graphic novel? And sometimes I guess individual taste at the earlier stages, but through this process, having learnt a lot more about the intellectual rigour of each form, which each of us brings with our different set of skills and responsibilities as practitioners as well. It was just, such an extraordinary process. I feel very lucky to have been part of it.
I love what you said about doubt. Doubt, I think, is really important, both books that create space for it, but discussions that create space for it. And the great privilege of being on this panel has been changing my mind. I think we've had such a lucky panel of people that we were all able to respectfully and had the comradeship of trying to change each other's minds, and we did. There are books on this list that wouldn't be there had my mind not been changed, and I think this the opposite is true. And I think that's a really wonderful experience about what stories, but not just the book itself, but the discourse around it, and why I will beat the drum of the need for a robust critical culture in Australia, why that's so deeply important. Spaces of discussion, this kind of space is equally as important as the literature.
I also want to talk about form. Despite the fact that I just talked about 3 works of fiction, I adore non-fiction. And on this list, we have non-fiction poetry and a non-fiction graphic novel. So if you have a form that you enjoy, that you pick up when you go to a library or a bookstore, I don't know, you'll find something else, I think, on this list that you might adore that would not be something that you ever gravitated towards otherwise.
Now, can we talk about, because we talked about this a little bit, some things that we thought might have been lovely to have seen submitted, some genres, some themes, some even diverse range of authors that we thought, oh, how come they're not on this year? How come this group of female authors, or, you know, yeah, Astrid, do you want to?
I think that 2022 was an odd year for the world. I think it was an odd year for Australia, and I think it was an odd year for publishing. And I think that, you know, given the lead times of publishing and how long it takes to create a book, how long it takes to edit and print and distribute and all the rest of it, I think, you know, works published in 2022 kind of came from a period of oddness, shall we say. And I think, you know, sometimes you can feel that in the books. And I think we've probably captured a bit of that with this collection of 12 that might strike some as different or odd.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like reading 200 books in a year is like taking a core sample of how people feel in a particular moment, and there's a real pleasure in the collective reading, even the books that we violently did not enjoy, but to get a kind of sense of what people are thinking about and what people care about. And I did feel like there was a kind of a mismatch potentially between the mood we're in now and the mood in which a lot of books have been written. Like there's a kind of agitation, and we're not sure what it is we hold next for us, but we haven't quite managed to move into that space yet. This was a discombobulating collection, the whole 200. There was a sense of discombobulation. And so if the list is discombobulating in a good way, I hope, I think it captures that feeling of not being able to pin ourselves to a particular mood or a particular understanding of time and place. And yes, some of it's pandemic and some of it's climate change, but there are no pandemic or particularly climate change novels in here. They're touched upon, but it's not the prevailing theme. I think it captures some sort of internal agitation, which is fascinating, like culturally fascinating.
And a lot of them explore very close relationships, you know, parents and children, the ageing process, women who live very closely with people who might be quite threatening to them. And I think it captures a particular mood of the time too, doesn't it? We didn't have any pandemic, as Beejay mentioned, but there was an uncanny sense of living too close to people.
But you said that was an interesting question, what would you have liked to have seen? And
Yeah.
I think Astrid will agree with me. Please send your genre novels.
Yeah.
Like, we're not genre snobs.
Yeah.
I didn't get into being a critic because I want to cut literature down. I want to open the doors. Like, bring us your speculative fiction. Bring us your romances. I would love to have read a really sexy book. Like,
There were none.
like, I really would have loved a sex scene or two or three.
Yeah, it's
Like,
possible the pandemic wasn't.
Not on people's minds.
but that would have been wonderful. Like, I think what's beautiful about the Stella is how it wants to kick the doors open. Mm-hmm. And I would encourage big and little publishers, send us your weirdos. Oh, send them. And if not, I'll give you my postal address and send them to me.
I think one more thing to kind of touch on is I think we've all witnessed, and this is a beautiful thing, I think we have all witnessed over the last, 5 years more, fiction and non-fiction that involves a lot of pain and trauma. We need that. There must always be space. But I think as you read through the long list and consider kind of what is publishing, there's something that comes after trauma, and it is empowerment and challenge and something. You can make something from the pain, and I think that's starting to come out when you read these 12, and I think that is beautiful too. The next step.
And with that, I think Astrid has ended this evening on a perfect note. Thank you, Astrid. Yes, and I'd like to congratulate all our winners.
And Alice, these are for you.
Yeah. If I could indulge you a second, it is an extraordinarily hard thing to be the calm centre in the middle of a judging panel when you have people who read differently, who care differently, who love differently. And Alice is extraordinary. She's calm, she's organised, she's compassionate, she makes space for everyone, she sees everyone and what they bring to the table. It has been one of the great privileges of my critical career to be on this panel, and that's largely to do with you. So thank you, Alice. Okay, can all bugger off now.
Bye.